Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1284, November the 28th, 2020, Saturday. Thank you so much for tuning in. I certainly hope that this video uploads and that you're able to watch this video. The censorship is really bad right now. The past 2 or 3 weeks I've experienced things I've never experienced before. Having videos that I upload not loading, but old videos uploading instead. Had a video upload twice. It's not the video I uploaded. I know because I deleted that video from my file. It wasn't even in my file anymore. So there's things going on, and I've never seen the censorship this bad, particularly if your video is about the election and you're saying anything that is not kosher with the corporate media crowd, and of course the mother of all tyrannical forces in the world today, social media. So hopefully you'll get to watch this video. So there's been quite a few developments over the past 3 or 4 days since I've last done a video. Unfortunately, the last video I did you didn't get to see because it didn't upload. So and if I try to re-upload it, it fails. So there's something in that video that somebody doesn't like. Don't want you to hear. I don't know what. I'm not saying anything a lot of other people aren't saying. Anyway, I'm not going to spend any more time on that. Let's just hope that you get to see the video. So in the last 3 to 4 days, we have seen a momentum shift. It's a momentum shift, and you can tell because the media has doubled and tripled down on the way that they're covering this. They continue to say, if they do cover anything at all, they say it's conspiracy theory. Trump has no evidence of any fraud. They've presented no evidence. They're losing all their cases in the courts. Blah 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 blah. You know, the whole routine. And when they of course we had this hearing in Pennsylvania, very important hearing, very important evidence brought forward in that hearing, and the media practically did not cover that at all. And when they did cover it, they only did so to ridicule it. And so we're witnessing a level of bias and censorship. It is information being weaponized. It is so-called news being weaponized. I've never seen anything like it before in this country, or quite honestly, even in some of the commie countries when I was in the military, and we used to monitor the propaganda coming out of several commie countries. I don't ever remember anything even like this. This is as bad as anything I've ever seen. But there's no question that there is a momentum shift, and there are a lot of Democrats who are really frightened. And another reason we know that they're really frightened is because when the Trump campaign, and remember, there's multiple people involved in these lawsuits. You have the official Trump campaign, you have Trump's personal attorneys, then you have the freelancers like Sidney Powell and Linwood, and then you've got private organizations, then you've got state legislatures, and they're all involved in some sort of proceedings. Some are legal, some with the state legislatures have to do with what they do in the state legislatures. However, they have even talked about going to the courts, including the Supreme Court. So there is definitely a big shift in momentum in the last 3 or 4 days, particularly after that hearing in Pennsylvania, when we actually got to hear from some very, what I would consider very respectable and informed witnesses. You know, people with some serious cred, and that hearing definitely caused a momentum shift. And the thing is, there's going to be 3 to 4 more of those types of public hearings coming up early in this upcoming week, Monday and Tuesday, in these other states. It looks like we've got Nevada is going to hold hearings. Arizona is going to hold hearings. We currently have the recount going on in Georgia, and hopefully the recount is being done a lot better than the original recount, which was just counting the same fraudulent ballots they counted the first time. Hopefully that's being handled much better this time. There's a similar type of thing going on in Arizona. So these hearings, even though they're largely being ignored by the media or ridiculed by the media, people are seeing them. They are being spread about. There's a lot of censorship. People are posting these up, and I don't know how. Again, I mean, I'm not on Facebook or Twitter, so I'm not sure how many of these people's posts are being completely removed, or if they're just getting that disclaimer, which is what I've been seeing on some of my videos. These disclaimers. And that's happening to everybody. It's a default disclaimer. If you question the official narrative, you get a disclaimer put on your video that says the AP has called the election for Joe Biden. The AP, the Associated Press does not call elections. Trump has not conceded. And at this time, the Electoral College has not reported enough votes for Biden to be the president-elect. He's still candidate Biden. Now, you could say he's the presumptive nominee, if you want, but he's not the president-elect. Not by a long shot. But the momentum is changing, and I think that next week, I think that we're going to see a very big push with these open hearings going on. Trump is going to be doing a rally in Georgia on Saturday night, tonight. He's going to be doing a rally. I expect you might see him do maybe another rally or two the following week, maybe somewhere like Pennsylvania, maybe somewhere like Michigan, maybe Arizona or Nevada, somewhere like that. So I think that the Trump team is realizing that they're taking a beating in the media narrative because it's being ignored or being ridiculed. The truth is not being reported. They continue to repeat over and over and over across all spectrums of the media that the Trump team has not presented any evidence, despite the fact that they produced tons of evidence. Now, so I think that the momentum is definitely shifting, and of course I've been looking at the odds makers and the betting odds and things like that. They not only have they not started paying out bets, they're still taking bets. And Trump has had a surge in the last 2 or 3 days with people calling to place bets for Trump. So there's no doubt that there is a momentum shift happening, and I think in the upcoming week you'll see more of that. And this is probably all going to culminate, I assume, to where we get to a point where the Supreme Court's going to hear some case, which makes me nervous. I quite honestly do not trust the courts. Maybe I should. I know we got a 5-4 majority at the Supreme Court, but I'm not sure what they're going to be ruling on, and that's my issue. I'm not sure exactly what is they'll be asked to rule on. Typically, the Supreme Court gets a case. They're going to get a case that will be challenging the lower court, which the court before the Supreme Court would be the appeals court. So they're going to be dealing with an issue of, did the appeals court get it right? So I'm not sure what the case would be before the Supreme Court, but the courts make me nervous, and quite honestly, I don't know that we have time to battle this through the courts. December 14th is pretty much the cutoff. Now, you can go beyond that or what have you to the Supreme Court, but I think by December 14th, it's going to be a much tougher road to hoe if it goes past that date through the courts. I don't believe that going through the courts is the best remedy. And again, this is not an issue of whether or not Trump's team or any of the other people involved in these lawsuits, whether or not they have the evidence. The question is, do they have the time? And right now, I just don't think we have the time to let all these things play out unless everything is fast-tracked. And again, if it goes to the Supreme Court, I'm not sure what they're going to be asked to be ruling on. I'm not sure if the Supreme Court's going to be able to hear from one single witness, or if they're just going to rule on what the previous court, the appeals court, shot down. I don't trust going through the courts process, because the Supreme Court could end it. The Supreme Court could come out with a ruling that would end it, that would prevent any other legal challenges, at which point it's pretty much over. I tend to believe at this point, and I've long given up, that they are going to start moving votes around and say, okay, well, we're going to take away X amount of votes from Biden and give votes to Trump. I don't know that we're going to see that happen. I don't know how it could happen, because what number are you going to use? Where are you going to get that number? And as soon as you do, you're going to get a challenge back in the courts. Everything ends up back in the courts. And as long as it ends up back in the courts, there just isn't time. I honestly believe that the best move that these Republican controlled legislatures in 4 of the 6 states in play right now, I honestly believe the best move they could make is to say, you know what? This election in my state was so screwed up, we can't tell, and we don't have time nor the resources to go back and try to figure out what were legal votes and not legal votes. I don't think we can sort this out in time. I think that the only choice we have is to decertify ourselves. We're just going to have to pull all the votes off the table. We will not be sending any electors to the Electoral College. We're just pulling our vote. We're out of it. Now, if Pennsylvania, and that's the state most likely to do it, if Pennsylvania did that, Pennsylvania and any 2 of the other states did that, that would deprive both candidates of the ability to reach 270, in which case we would go into the Congress for a contingent election where if it came down to a party line vote, Trump would win. And I still think that this is Trump's best strategy, is to get to a position where they simply cannot reconcile what the true vote count was, what the true result of the election was in 4, 5, 6 of these states, at which point they simply cannot certify the election. Again, the state legislatures may decide to do this. They're probably going to face a court challenge, which is fine. If everything is tied up in a court challenge, and you have 3 or 4, Pennsylvania and 2 other states who refuse to certify their electors, there simply will not be the electoral votes for either person to get 270, and it goes to the Congress where Trump would win in a contingent election. I think that that is the best possible outcome we can hope for right now. Again, that's just my guess. That's my opinion, is that I think that's the best outcome, and it's just a guess that that's what would happen. I think it's in the realm of possibilities in a reasonable percentage. I no longer believe there's really any chance that we're going to see votes flipped, or they're going to just say, okay, we're taking these votes away from Biden. The only way that would happen is if the Supreme Court got this case a couple days before the 14th, and they realized, hey, we have to step in, we have to take this case, and we have to come up with a solution, not just a solution for one issue of the previous court, the appeals court shooting down something that the Trump team wanted, but we have to come out and make a statement that will cover all of the states in dispute and put this thing to bed, not just for this election, but for future elections. And that would be something where the Supreme Court would come out and say, look, all the things that were done in about a half a dozen of these states, for whatever reason, COVID, whatever, these were all things that should not have been done. They were really unconstitutional. Therefore, we're going to go back to the original script, the way this thing's supposed to go. Any vote that came in after the polls closed does not count. Period. Any vote that cannot be verified, meaning a signature on the envelope matching the signature on the ballot, cannot be counted. Anyone who sent in a provisional ballot that did not request one that vote cannot be counted. So I think the Supreme Court could come up with a list and say any of these types of votes that were counted cannot be counted, and that would be across the country. That would resolve all of the issues in all of the states. At least they'd have a clear statement from the Supreme Court, what votes can count, what votes cannot count. That would put the whole thing to bed, and Trump would win, and win big. But because you can't really challenge above the Supreme Court, that's the final stop, and that may be where we end up. It favors us 5-4, but it's still tricky. It's a tricky wicket, and I don't trust it. Obviously, yesterday, The appeals court did shoot down the Trump legal team, and now they have the ability to go petition to the Supreme Court, and you can expect that they'll probably be doing that today. I would expect by Monday they'll have that petition filed with the Supreme Court, and we'll probably have a hearing probably within a few days in the next week. I'd say probably before the end of next week they could have a hearing. I assume SCOTUS are all watching everything that's going on, and so they're not going to be like blindsided by anything. They're going to have a pretty good grip on what's going on already when they get the case. Question is, what case will they get? Are they going to be issuing just a ruling to either uphold or reject the appeals court decision that landed them at the Supreme Court, or are they going to take a much wider view and realize that this is a never-ending process? These issues will be revisited upon the Supreme Court until the 14th, maybe beyond, at which point I don't like the word constitutional crisis, but you certainly get into a constitutional, quagmire, I think. And so I think there's a lot to be considered here for the Supreme Court justices. I think the best thing they could do, if the Supreme Court is going to get involved, I think the best thing they could do, and I'm not so sure they'll even take this case. They may not even take it. They may try to just force the state legislatures to work it out. But assuming they take the case, it's possible that they could decide, you know what, this is going on in every state. There's going to be more trips up here to the Supreme Court. Time is running out. This has to be brought to a conclusion. Ultimately, where should this end up? And where it should end up is that we follow the Constitution, and that Election Day is Election Day, and verified votes are verified votes. Very simple. And I think that would be the best case scenario. I just don't think that may happen, because every single thing will be challenged. And keep in mind, as we've learned, when the Trump legal team shows up in these court hearings, the Democrats, the Biden campaign, and the deep state and all their friends, they have an entire team of country club lawyers present, as in 10 or 12, a whole team, a dozen of these corporate lawyers who are there to throw a wrench in the spokes and fight it. So clearly, the Democrats, Biden, and the deep state do not want recounts. They do not want to separate legal ballots from illegal ballots. They're trying to block, and this may be their undoing. Remember, if in fact there can be no resolution, and 3 or 4 of these states that are controlled by Republicans, if they can get together and say, okay, we just can't send any electors because we don't have time to sort this out. We're pretty sure that the result we got now is not correct. There isn't time to go through the courts. The only thing we can do is pull our electors off the table. In which case it goes into this contingent election, in which case Trump would likely win in a party line vote. So anyway, as I said, I feel that the momentum is changing, but time is not on our side, and I don't know that there's time to go through the court process, the legal process. I believe it'll end up with open cases waiting to be heard by the courts. December 14th will show up, and these state legislatures will be forced to make a decision whether to validate the election or not. So we will see where all of this goes, but everything is in flux right now. But I can tell you that my gut feeling is that Trump is not going to concede the election. As long as he feels that, I think what Trump needs to do to secede or to walk away is to see that every legal vote was counted, every illegal vote was not counted, and that he lost fair and square. I think until he sees that, he's not going to concede. In which case, back to the courts, and he'll go through the courts until the sand runs out of the hourglass and there's no more time. At which point, it really ultimately will fall back into the state legislations again 4 of the 6 of the ones in play are controlled by Republicans. And they are, of course, taking lots and lots of heat from the voters in their states who voted for Trump, who are burning up their phone lines, and who are showing up in these hearings, who are showing up to protest. So there's a lot of pressure being brought to bear from a lot of different sides. Now, we also had Sidney Powell. She dropped 2 devastating lawsuits, one in Georgia, one in Pennsylvania, the night before Thanksgiving. And I read through some of that, and it looks very solid. She's got some very good testimony from very reliable, good, respectable sources. The problem with Sidney Powell's situation is that it will never get resolved before January 20th. Sidney Powell's stuff is going to be going on and on. You know, if they anoint China Joe as president, he could be president for 2 years before Sidney Powell finally gets a resolution to her cases, and they say, "Yep, well, looks like you were right. Trump should have been the president." Oh well, that's how it goes, you know. So she may end up winning in the end and proving her case, but it will be long, long gone. Now maybe she can get her hearings faster or something like that, but ultimately I think that there just isn't time to go Sidney Powell's route. But I'm glad she is pursuing it, and I think she should continue on. Of course, now we know why the Trump campaign had to separate themselves from Sidney Powell. Because the people she names as the targets in her lawsuit, the people she is suing, are Republicans, including the governor of Georgia and the number 2, number 3. The governor and 2 other Republicans in Georgia are the people Sidney Powell is suing in her legal cases. So, yeah, that would create a problem for the Trump team politically, and also there would be countersuits you can expect if it were the president's legal team. So now we know why they had to separate themselves from Sidney Powell, because she's going to name, and she now has named, the governor of Georgia, and as well as Republicans both in Georgia and in Pennsylvania, as well as some Democrats too, as being part of a plot. So now we know why Sidney Powell had to be pulled away. She was going to create some issues, for legal issues for the Trump campaign, and they don't need any of those right now. Countersuits. We also had, on Friday, we had the Pennsylvania filing a resolution. This would be their state representatives, state Senate and representatives, filing a resolution disputing the election results. So now they are officially filing a dispute with the courts to dispute. They filed a resolution to dispute the election results. That's in Pennsylvania. This is being led by this senator from Pennsylvania, who many of you saw in the hearings. And his suit is he's wanting for the Republicans in Pennsylvania to reclaim the power to appoint electors. What he's saying, and his group, and I think he's got the leadership on board, is to say, well, we don't trust the election results, so we're just going to go ahead and appoint our own electors, and they will go and vote for Trump. This, of course, will certainly result in a counter suit by the Democrats. So where that goes, I don't know, and I'm not sure they need to even go that route. According to the Constitution, they can choose the electors, but it's possible that that too can be challenged in court. Everything ends up in the courts, and there isn't time to go through the courts. That's why I'm saying I could see all of this stuff blowing up, all these lawsuits being filed, countersuits being filed. There simply isn't time. And unless the Supreme Court wants to step in and just, use the Trump card, so to speak, over all the courts, over all the legislatures, and say, look, votes coming in after election night don't count. Votes where you can't verify signatures don't count. And just a list of things, votes that don't count. And then send it back to the state legislatures and say, there you go. Throw out all the votes that we say don't count. Count the ones that do count and give us a score. That's probably the one-size-fits-all, settles it for now and in the future. Whether or not the Supreme Court will go there or can go there. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. Of course, I mentioned there's going to be hearings. They had hearings in Pennsylvania. There's going to be hearings in Arizona on November 30th. There's going to be hearings in Nevada. And I think that you'll see eventually hearings at other places. You have the recount going on in Wisconsin, where it's very close. I think it's like down to like 12,000 votes now, or 20,000. Georgia, where it's like 12,000. That recount's going on. So you have a lot of different things going on. But ultimately, it looks like to me that everything ends up in the courts. And I just don't think that there's time. I think that I think there's at least a 50-50 shot that if this continues down the path it's going, which is that it's going to stay within the state legislatures and the state courts, that this will not be able to be resolved. And there will at least a 50-50 shot that we go into a contingent election, which favors Trump. The state legislatures could be successful in appointing electors that go put their votes for Trump, in which case Trump wins again. Or you could have a Supreme Court decision which just they step in and they put the kibosh on all this, reestablish what the rules are for elections, and say this is it, it's cut and dried, you count these votes, you don't count these, and let the chips fall where they may. That's a possibility. But I don't see Trump conceding. No matter what happens, I don't see him conceding. I just don't. Unless it was a Supreme Court ruling that, something like that maybe. But other than that, I really don't see him conceding. There's this theory also that I agree with. Steve Bannon has been pretty much advancing this theory. And this is why I believe that they're really focused on Pennsylvania. And it's exactly where I would be focusing too. Because in Pennsylvania, you have a pretty good group of state senators and state representatives. And they are probably the most aggressive of all the states. They're the ones who have gone and filed a resolution to dispute the election results. We heard 2 of those state senators in the Pennsylvania hearings say flat out they think Trump won the election and they're not going to roll over. They're going to fight to make sure that Trump gets Pennsylvania's votes. So I think Pennsylvania is still the strongest card to play. That's where I put most of my apples. That's the basket I put most of my apples in, because I do believe Steve Bannon is correct when he says that this could be like a domino effect, which is that if Pennsylvania, one of the bigger states, Pennsylvania or Georgia specifically, one of those 2 states, if they should flip from what's on the board now and put their electors to support Trump, to vote for Trump, I think that could cause a domino effect. If one falls, the rest of them will fall. If one falls, so Trump says, yeah, this election was rigged, we've seen the fraud, because now you will have a precedent that you will have a state that will have said, yes, we've seen overwhelming evidence, all the evidence we need to see to show that this election was rigged, it was fraudulent. We don't believe the vote that we currently have. We think there's a lot of votes in there, well more than you need to overturn the election, that were fraudulent. So we are going to put our electors for Trump, or we're not going to put any electors up at all, or whatever. I think whatever Pennsylvania does, and I think they'll be the one to watch, I do believe that will set some sort of a precedent, and that the dominoes will fall in that direction. At some point, one of these states in play is going to reach a final decision on what they're going to do for how they're going to finally resolve this. And I think whatever that decision is, it will probably be picked up by the rest of the states. If even one state overturns the results based on the fact they think the election was fraudulent, I think that will trigger this domino effect. And the media will no longer be able to lie. In fact, I would say by the middle of next week, the media is going to have to start at least halfway covering this stuff and saying, well, there are some issues. But they can say, we still don't think it's enough to overturn the election. But they cannot ignore the overwhelming evidence, because they're becoming a joke at this point. And once there are court decisions, or once a major state like Pennsylvania or Georgia overturns their state for Trump, they'll be forced, obviously, to cover that. They're not going to ignore that. They won't be able to ignore that. So I think a lot of things by this time next week, I think a lot of things will be getting sorted out. I think we'll have an idea where it's going by this time next week. I think everything's still up in the air. But I think it's looking more and more like a contingent election because I don't know that these issues have time to be resolved in the courts. And it may end up being thrown back to the Congress. So finally, one other note before I go, just should probably let you know that Carter Page has filed a lawsuit for $75 million against the Department of Justice, Comey, McCabe, Strzok, and some others who he names in the lawsuit. $75 million lawsuit. I assume it's a deprivation of rights or violating his constitutional rights or something like that. I think Carter Page will get paid. Carter Page will get paid. So that's what I have right now. Like all of you, I'm just watching everything and doing my best to understand where all this is going. And I just don't think anybody knows right now. I'm just certain of a couple things. Number one, Trump is not going to concede. There is overwhelming evidence of election fraud. Is it enough? I don't know. Is the Supreme Court going to get involved? And if they do, are they going to try to bring this entire thing to a head? Or are they going to try to kick it back to the legislatures? And of course, I ultimately believe, my gut's telling me, this thing is going to be probably sorted out in the state legislatures. And I think there's a 50-50 shot that they're not going to be able to resolve it because I don't think they have time or the resources or the ability to actually find out how many votes were legal and illegal. Too many envelopes have been separated. Too many things have happened. You can't go back and sort this out. I think it's a 50-50 shot or better that this gets kicked into a contingency election and that possibly several of these states just simply will not send any electors to cast any votes for their state. They'll just call it a wash. So we'll keep watching. Keep the faith. This thing isn't over. Not at all. In fact, as I said at the beginning of the video, I believe the momentum has shifted. And I think we just need to keep watching and see where this goes. Do not bet against President Trump. They tried to take him out in 2 other coups and they failed. They failed. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back next time there's news to report. See you. Bye.